A billionaire CEO's TED Talk is interrupted by a little boy brandishing an old photograph. "Sir, can you tell everyone about this part of the story?" As the CEO is about to have him escorted out, he catches a glimpse of the picture and feels his entire world fall apart. The lights dimmed as the host stepped aside, his practiced grin lingering just long enough to sell the moment. Graham Langford walked out to a thunderous welcome, the kind of applause that didn't feel like noise anymore, it felt like confirmation. Rows of faces beamed up at him, phones raised, eyes wide with reverence. A sold-out TED stage. Headliner. Innovator of the decade. A man who turned a college dorm sketch into Langford Dynamics, a global force in clean tech and AI integration. He waited just long enough for the applause to crest, then gave a measured nod and launched into his opening. He'd done this dozens of times, sometimes in front of boardrooms, sometimes on global panels, but this stage was the one that made people believe they were watching history unfold. He talked about tenacity, about risk, about sleepless nights and impossible choices. How he pitched a half-formed idea to venture capitalists who only cared because they believed in him. He framed the story just right, personal but focused, self-deprecating in just the right places. The audience responded on cue, laughter, nods, the occasional impressed murmur. He was midway through a story about his first prototype's battery overheating and blowing up his microwave when a small voice cut through the auditorium. "Sir? Can you tell everyone about this part of the story?" The sound was sharp, oddly confident. A ripple moved through the audience as heads turned. Graham paused, confused for a beat, before his eyes found the speaker. A boy, maybe 9 or 10, had stood up from one of the side aisles, holding up something small and rectangular. He wasn't yelling. He didn't need to. The kid had the room's full attention just by existing where he shouldn't have been. Graham squinted. "I'm sorry, what's that?" His tone was light, practiced. A gentle redirection, the kind used to handle weird hecklers without losing the crowd. But the boy held his ground and repeated, louder this time. "Can you tell them about this?" He walked closer to the stage, pushing past the stunned usher. "You forgot this part." Security was already moving, 2 men weaving through the seats toward the boy, but something made Graham lift his hand. "Hold on." The boy stopped just below the stage, lifted the photo higher. "You remember, right?" A beat passed. The image was too far away to see clearly, but something about it snagged at Graham. He leaned forward, squinting again. "Can you bring that up here?" he asked before he realized what he was saying. The boy climbed the stairs like he'd rehearsed it. No hesitation. He crossed the stage and handed over the photo, then turned to face the crowd, completely unfazed. "He said he built the idea? But he didn't." "She did." Graham looked down at the photo and felt the floor drop out from under him. It was old. Slightly warped from age, creased down the middle. A snapshot of 2 people sitting cross-legged on a dorm room floor, cluttered table behind them, papers everywhere. His younger self, unmistakably him, leaning toward a girl with wild curls and a permanent marker in her hand, sketching something on a torn poster board. Next to it, the sketch, faint pencil lines and labels, just enough detail to make the shape familiar. It was the sketch. The first concept. Their final project. He knew that moment. He'd lived it. He tried not to think about it for over a decade. The audience was silent. Not a respectful silence, an uncertain one, thick and waiting. Graham's throat tightened. He hadn't seen her in years. Eva Serrano. She'd hated cameras back then, but she let him take that photo because they just finished building the thing that was supposed to change everything. And it had. Just not the way she imagined. The boy didn't speak again. He didn't have to. The photo and the name, she, were enough. Graham held the photo in one hand and the mic in the other, but his voice wouldn't come. A few awkward seconds ticked by before he forced out a weak, "Let's get back to the presentation." Someone in the front row raised a phone, capturing everything. He cleared his throat and looked at the clicker in his hand, tried to move to the next slide, but the words blurred. He couldn't stop seeing that sketch. The messy handwriting, Her handwriting. The lines that he'd redrawn in clean CD files later. The prototype she'd helped build but never got to pitch. Because he left. Took the job offer. Took the idea. Took the company name from a list they made together in a fit of post-midterm insomnia. Another slide appeared behind him. The company timeline. The audience watched him flounder in real time. He tried again to speak, but the words came out in pieces, nothing coherent. His voice cracked in a way he couldn't mask. No one laughed this time. The boy was still standing on stage. Security had finally reached the edge, hesitant now, waiting for a cue. Graham stared at them blankly, then back at the boy. "Where did you get this?" he asked, quietly, like it would stay private in a room full of 1,000 people. The boy looked up at him. "From my mom's drawer. She said I shouldn't come. But you keep saying this is your story. I thought people should know it's hers, too." Graham didn't know what to say. His mind raced through years of silence, of ignored messages, of a deliberate, tidy erasure. The people in front of him were no longer clapping. They were watching, filming, waiting for an answer. "I need a moment," he muttered, and then, without planning it, without looking back, he stepped off the stage. He walked quickly, then faster, as his headset crackled in his ear, someone trying to manage the disaster. He tugged it off and dropped it into a trash can as he passed. Out the side door, into a hallway, past a crew member asking if he was okay. The answer would have been no, but he didn't stop to say it. Outside, a photographer caught a blurred shot of him stepping into a black car. By the time the vehicle pulled away, the clip had already hit Twitter. Billionaire CEO's speech derailed by boy with photo bombshell. The views doubled every few minutes. Forums erupted. Reddit threads filled with frame-by-frame breakdowns of the boy's words, the CEO's face, the image itself. A grainy close-up revealed the young woman in the photo. Facial recognition caught her name, Eva Serrano. Former engineering student. Uncredited contributor. Langford Dynamics forgotten half. Inside the car, Graham stared out the window, numb. The photo sat in his lap. The silence around it felt louder than the crowd he'd left behind. For the first time in years, the story wasn't his to tell. Graham didn't sleep that night. After the car dropped him off at his building, he stepped into the lobby without acknowledging the doorman, crossed straight into the private elevator, and leaned back against the mirrored wall as the floor lights ticked upward. The photo the boy had handed him was still folded in his pocket. He hadn't looked at it since leaving the stage, but he felt its presence like a small, sharp weight he couldn't shake. Upstairs, his penthouse sat in its usual polished silence. He dropped his blazer on a chair and walked into the kitchen, filled a glass with water, and poured it straight into the sink. No appetite, no thirst. Just noise in his head. His phone buzzed for the 50th time, texts, calls, missed messages from every angle. PR, legal. Devin. 2 board members. His assistant. The TED organizers. His inbox was on fire, and the headlines were already spinning. He skimmed one. Langford legacy questioned after child challenges origin story, and then shut it all down. At some point around 2 in the morning, Devin showed up. He didn't wait for an invite, just let himself in with the code Graham had given him years ago. Slim suit, no tie, and carrying a laptop under his arm like a weapon. He tossed it on the kitchen island and opened it in one move, then glanced at Graham, who hadn't moved from the bar stool. "All right," Devin said. "Let's be smart about this." Graham didn't answer. Devin clicked through windows, pulled up live feeds, pressed clippings, screenshots of posts from every major platform. The photo. The boy. People speculating who he was. Who she was. Graham's silence had left a gap, and the internet filled it fast. Damage control playbook. Deny, delay, redirect. We say the photo was taken out of context. That you don't recognize the woman. That the sketch isn't the one we built the company on. We push a statement tomorrow morning. Vague but reassuring. Graham was still staring at the countertop. It's her. Devin paused. Who? He pulled the photo out and placed it between them. Eva. From undergrad. We were working on a modular energy storage unit for our final project. That's it. That's the sketch. Her handwriting. Devin gave a slow blink, then leaned down and studied the photo. You sure? I didn't just take the idea. I took everything. There was a long pause. The hum of the refrigerator filled the space. Devin finally sat down across from him, arms folded. You're not confessing to intellectual theft right now. Are you? It wasn't like that, Graham said, though the words felt empty. We were working on it together. Then I got the call. One of the early VCs wanted to talk. I told her I'd loop her in later. I didn't. She kept calling. I didn't answer. I told myself it was temporary. That I'd make it right. And you never did. No. Devin ran a hand through his hair, let out a low sound of disbelief. You realize what happens if this gets traced properly. Shareholder lawsuits. Patent challenges. Not to mention you'll be the face of a plagiarism scandal on top of whatever personal drama that kid just dumped on stage. Graham didn't argue. He stood and walked to the window. The city lights blurred together in the distance. Below, cars moved like slow currents, unaware of the collapse happening 30 stories up. I need to find out where she is. Devin looked up. You think that's a good idea? I don't care if it is. In the hours that followed, while Devin worked the phones and drafted a legal response with their in-house team, Graham disappeared into his storage files. A stack of old boxes he hadn't touched in over a decade sat in a back room like a forgotten attic. He pulled them out one by one, sorting through scribbled notebooks, half-used sketchpads, hard drives, receipts, crumpled printouts of late-night idea bursts. At the bottom of one box, he found a folder labeled Capstone Serrano/Langford. Inside were blueprints, notes in 2 sets of handwriting, and a half-torn napkin where Eva had scrawled a list of potential names for their project. Langford Dynamics had been number 4. She'd circled it with a star. He sat on the floor with the folder in his lap and didn't move for a long time. A few pages in, there was a letter from her, a handwritten one she'd slipped into his dorm room the week after he left. It was short. Not angry. Not desperate. Just confused. She'd asked if he was okay. Said she didn't understand why he vanished. Wished him luck. Said she was proud of the work they did together. It hit harder than anything else. By the time daylight started creeping across the floorboards, Graham had pulled up her old email. Inactive. He tried her name in every major social platform. There were too many Eva Serranos, and none of them looked familiar. He went to LinkedIn, searched alumni records, found a thread from a reunion forum. Someone mentioned she was living out west now. Working with a nonprofit. Maybe teaching. Finally, he found a locked Instagram profile under a new name, but the profile picture stopped him cold. It was the boy. A bit older, same defiant look. He was sitting at a kitchen table surrounded by wires and circuit boards. There was a caption. Guess who tried to build a battery from scratch again? Graham stared at the photo. His hand hovered over the mouse, unsure what he even planned to do next. Message her? Apologize? Ask about the boy? The resemblance, his face, his shape, it wasn't just a guess anymore. It was fact. He pushed back from the desk and paced the room, stomach tight. Years of press training, boardroom strategy, legal defense, all useless now. None of it prepared him for the possibility that he had a son. That Eva had kept him secret. And yet, after what he'd done, could he blame her? He thought back to college. Eva laughing through an all-nighter, throwing paper balls at him between sketches. The way she got hyper-focused when things clicked, bouncing around ideas faster than he could type. They'd been a team. Partners in the best way. He remembered walking to that investor meeting alone, rehearsing how he'd explain the prototype. How easy it was to let the story shift, just a little. How it felt too complicated to go back and fix it once the money came in. So he hadn't. Not then. Not ever. He pulled out his phone and typed Eva's name into the Notes app, just her name. No message yet. He wasn't sure what to say. Only that he couldn't stay silent. The sound of Devon's footsteps broke the quiet. "Statements going out," he said, voice low. "We've bought ourselves about a day, maybe 2. But they're coming hard." Graham nodded. "I need to find her. I figured. You want to run anything by legal before you reach out?" "No." Devon hesitated. "If this goes south, it won't just be the company that tanks. It'll be everything. You ready for that?" Graham looked back at the screen. The photo of the boy still open, framed by wires and tools. "No," he said. "But I'm going anyway." It took Graham less than 24 hours to find her address. Devon warned him again not to go, but Graham ignored him. No legal buffer, no PR strategy. Just a rental car, a location in the foothills outside Santa Rosa, and a gut full of nerves he couldn't shake. The drive was long enough to second-guess himself a dozen times, and each time he thought of turning back, he pictured the photo again. The boy's look, not scared or angry, just sure. Like he had every right to ask the question he did. Like he already knew the answer. The house was smaller than Graham expected. Blue siding faded from sun exposure, an uneven path leading to a crooked front step, a rusted mailbox that looked one gust away from collapse. Still, it was tidy. The garden beds along the porch were well kept, someone had fixed the screen door recently, and there was a hand-painted wooden sign nailed to the railing, "No soliciting." No preaching. Definitely no pitching. Graham half smiled at that. She hadn't changed. He stood there for a minute, hand hovering near the doorbell, rehearsing what he might say. Nothing sounded right. Eventually, he just pressed the bell and waited. When she opened the door, she didn't speak. Just stared at him. There was no warm rush of recognition, no hesitant curiosity. Only the kind of stillness that made it clear she'd imagined this moment before, and hated every version of it. Graham tried to start. "Eva." She held up a hand and stepped out onto the porch, closing the door behind her. "You have 5 minutes. Talk fast." He hadn't expected warmth, but the sheer precision of her tone threw him. She looked different. Older, of course, but not in a way that dulled anything. Her features were sharper now, more defined, like someone who'd spent years fighting for space and didn't intend to give up any of it. "I saw the photo," he said. "I know. You took the photo. Years ago. Then you took the rest." He opened his mouth, then closed it. "I didn't come here to fight." She crossed her arms. "Then you should have stayed in your office, where everything is scripted and clean." "I had no idea," he said. "About the boy. About any of it. That's because you didn't ask." Her voice cracked slightly, not from weakness but force. "You ghosted me, Graham. You took the meeting, took the idea, took the name, and vanished. And now you want what, forgiveness?" He shook his head. "I want to talk. I want to understand. That kid, he's mine?" She looked at him for a long time before answering. "Yes. His name is Leo." Graham let the name settle in. "Why didn't you tell me?" "I wanted to." Her arms dropped to her sides. "At first I didn't. I was angry. You disappeared, left me to explain to our professors why you dropped out mid-semester. I thought I'd hear from you in a week. Then another. Then nothing. And when I found out I was pregnant, I told myself you didn't deserve to know. That you made your choice. I didn't know how to face you," he said. "I was offered everything we'd been working toward. I thought I could bring you in later. Fix it after I'd secured funding." She laughed sharply. "You were going to circle back to the mother of your child and your co-creator? Great plan." He stepped closer. "I didn't know you were pregnant. And if I had told you? Would you have flown back from your tech summits? Would you have paused your billion-dollar climb to come change diapers in a rented apartment?" She shook her head. "I told myself it didn't matter. That I could raise him on my own. And when I saw the things you were willing to do for success, when you cut people out, rewrote history, turned our project into a personal brand, I knew I made the right call. From the window beside the door, Graham noticed movement. A small face watching, partly hidden behind the curtain. Leo. He looked smaller now, more like a real kid than a symbol, but there was a steady focus in his gaze that reminded Graham of late-night study sessions and stubborn design arguments. I want to meet him, Graham said. Eva followed his gaze. Her face didn't soften, but she didn't stop him either. She opened the door a few inches and called inside. Leo? Come here, please. The boy stepped out slowly, hands in the front pocket of a hoodie too big for him. He looked up at Graham with that same quiet certainty. Hey, he said, like this was all perfectly ordinary. Hey, Graham replied, caught off guard. They stood there for a moment, two strangers with too much unspoken between them. Graham searched for something to say, but everything felt stupid. Leo saved him the trouble. You're taller than I thought, he said. And your voice sounds different when you're not pretending to be humble. That broke the tension just enough. Eva pressed her lips together to keep from smiling. Graham blinked. I guess I had it coming. You guess right. Do you like robotics? Graham asked. I saw that photo of you. Looked like you were building something. Always am, Leo said. Not because of you, though. Just so we're clear. Graham nodded. Crystal. The boy tilted his head, studying him like a puzzle he hadn't decided was worth solving. You're not going to try to take me away or anything, right? No, Graham said. I'm just trying to be here now. Leo gave a small shrug. Okay. But no speeches. I've heard enough. Eva stepped in. That's enough for today. Leo disappeared back inside. The door clicked shut. She turned back to Graham. He doesn't need your money, she said. I wasn't. She cut him off. You were. You always lead with that. You want to help? Be useful. Actually show up. But don't think you can buy your way into his life. That door doesn't open like that. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a folded check he hadn't realized he still carried, and held it out to her. Not as payment. Just as proof. I don't want this either, he said. I just didn't know what else to bring. Eva took the check without looking at it, tore it in half, then again, and let the pieces fall between them. If you want to be his father, she said, then earn it. But don't come back with handouts and guilt. He's not some PR fix. Graham watched the paper drift into the bushes. He nodded once, turned, and walked back to the car. This wasn't over. Not even close. But for the first time in years, he was starting from nothing, and somehow, that felt right. The sound of the front door slamming stayed with Graham long after he pulled away from Eva's house. It wasn't just the volume, or the finality of it, it was the way it underlined everything she said, how it carved a line between who he'd been and what came next. He didn't try to justify himself on the drive back. Didn't call Devin. Didn't rehearse a next move. He went straight to the office the next morning, running on barely 3 hours of sleep and an energy he couldn't name. The elevator opened onto his executive floor like always, but the mood had shifted. Faces turned and quickly turned away again. The receptionist looked like she'd swallowed a whole news cycle. Devin was already waiting in his office, pacing with his sleeves rolled up, laptop open, 2 phones buzzing on the desk. Graham stepped inside, and Devin didn't even greet him, just pushed the laptop toward him. It's out, he said. The sketch. The original one. Graham stared at the screen. There it was, Eva's handwriting, the rough layout, the same concept he'd refined and presented years ago. It was the exact image from the photo, now scanned and published across a dozen outlets. Below it, headlines piled up, Stolen Spark, Langford's origin story under fire. Former classmates' work raises legal questions. Anonymous insider confirms sketch was not solely Langford's. He sat down slowly. Who leaked it? We don't know yet. It's internal. Someone got into archived design files, ones we never included in any public release. My guess? Somebody from R&D. Maybe someone who's been sitting on this for a while, waiting for the right moment. Which is now, Graham muttered. Because of the kid. Because of you. Devon shot back. Because you stood there like a deer in headlights instead of controlling the narrative. Now you've got ethics watchdogs crawling all over us, and... He stopped, took a breath. Turn on your phone. Check your email. Graham hesitated, then pulled out his phone and unlocked it. There it was, an investor withdrawal notice. One of their earliest backers, a VC firm that had stuck with them through 3 expansions, had pulled out. In the body of the message, it was clear. Loss of confidence. Reputational risk. Legal vulnerabilities. Not a word about emotion. Just numbers, exposure, percentages. Devon, we've got maybe 48 hours before the board demands a vote of confidence, he said. Best case scenario, you survive with severe restrictions. Worst case? You're out. Completely. Graham leaned back. You think I should lie? I think you should strategize. There's still room to spin this. You acknowledge a collaborative past with Eva, position it as an oversight, maybe even launch a charitable initiative in her name. But if you go out there saying you stole something, that's corporate suicide. Graham didn't answer. Not because he didn't have thoughts, because he was too tired of trying to dress them up. He looked at the image of the sketch again, and knew what he should have done years ago. Known it, ignored it, buried it. Somewhere on the other side of the state, Eva was dealing with her own fallout. She'd woken up to a knock on the door and 3 reporters on the porch, all asking for comments. One shoved a phone in her face, replaying the TED Talk interruption. Another asked if she'd be pursuing legal action. A third wanted to speak to Leo. That was enough. She slammed the door, yanked the curtains closed, and locked every window. Leo sat at the kitchen table, chewing cereal slowly like he already knew he was in trouble. I told you not to go, Eva said, arms crossed, still facing the door. I know. She turned. You knew what would happen, and you still did it. He was lying, Leo said. Every video, every article, all of it. He kept talking about how he built the thing, how it came from his brilliant brain, and you just let it go. You let him. Eva's voice dropped. I let it go because I didn't want this. She gestured to the window. Microphones shoved in our faces. People camping outside. This wasn't justice. This is a media circus. I didn't do it for justice, Leo said quietly. I did it because I wanted him to say he was sorry. Eva stared at him, caught off guard. That's what this was about. Leo nodded once. For a long moment, she didn't say anything. Then she laughed, short, dry. Not cruel, just amazed. You really are mine. That afternoon, she unplugged the router, turned off the TV, and kept her phone on silent. When Leo asked if she was mad, she told him she was tired. Of hiding. Of being erased. Of pretending like none of it mattered. Because it did. Maybe not the headlines, maybe not the investors or the legal pieces, but the truth. The part Leo had asked for, and the part she'd stopped waiting to hear. Graham came back 2 days later. No driver, no tailored suit, no statement in hand. Just jeans, an old jacket, and a tension in his jaw that hadn't gone away since he saw the photo. Eva answered the door but didn't step outside this time. She leaned on the frame and waited. I'm not here to talk about the company, he said. Not today. She didn't reply, so he kept going. I can't undo what I did. I can't pretend it was anything but selfish. I told myself we'd reconnect later, that I'd share the credit eventually. But it was always about control. I wanted to win. And I did. At the cost of you, of the truth, of everything. Eva folded her arms. You're here to apologize? I'm here because I want to make it right. Not with a check. Not with PR. I want to talk. Really talk. If you'll let me. She studied him, then opened the door just enough. 10 minutes. No promises. He stepped inside for the first time in over a decade. The living room was small, cluttered with books, half-finished projects, and a stack of board games. Leo wasn't around, probably in his room, but his presence filled the place. They sat at the kitchen table, the same one Graham had seen on the locked Instagram profile. The same one where Leo had been building something. Eva poured 2 cups of tea, more from habit than hospitality. She didn't offer sugar. Didn't ask how he'd been. She let him speak. He told her everything. The first investor pitch. The moment he decided not to call her back. The launch of the company. The excuses he'd fed himself to justify every omission. And finally, how none of it felt like his anymore. Not the accolades. Not the speeches. Not even the company logo. When he finished, she didn't speak for a while. Then she asked the one question he hadn't prepared for. What do you want from Leo? He looked down at the table. I don't know. I want him to know I'm here. That I won't run again. Even if he never forgives me. Eva nodded slowly. He's a lot like me. Stubborn. Smart. And he doesn't like being handled. I noticed. She leaned back, watching him with a measured calm. Then don't handle him. Just show up. Outside, a car slowed down in front of the house. Another reporter. She didn't flinch this time. Want to help me scare that one off? She asked. Graham stood. Absolutely. And for the first time, they smiled at the same moment. Just briefly, but it was enough to feel like something real had started. Not repaired. Not redeemed. But started. The reporter never got out of the car. Graham waved a large broom from the porch like some disgruntled groundskeeper while Eva shouted something half playful, half serious about trespassing laws. The car idled for a few seconds, then rolled off down the street. Graham leaned the broom against the railing and looked at Eva, who just shook her head. This is going to keep happening, she said. Every week. Maybe every day. Then I'll buy more brooms, he said. But Eva wasn't smiling anymore. She looked tired. Not just from the press or the chaos, but from carrying it all for so long without help. That night, over a quiet dinner, Leo glued to a tablet, headphones in, Eva finally said it out loud. We need to get away. Graham didn't follow. From the media? From everything. From lawyers, investors, parents at school whispering in pickup lines. Leo's starting to dread going. He says he doesn't care, but he comes home and slams his door, won't talk for hours. I've been through this kind of thing before, not at this level, but enough to know it doesn't fade fast. People love a scandal more than a solution. You want to disappear? Just for a little while. No phones, no Wi-Fi, no statements. Just space. Graham didn't answer right away. His life had been online, on-call, in motion for over a decade. He didn't know what a day without his calendar looked like. But the last few weeks had stripped something from him, and maybe losing that wasn't such a bad thing. Okay, he said. Where? Eva pulled out an old key from a drawer and dropped it on the table. My aunt's cabin. 2 hours from here. It's falling apart, but it has a roof. Most of the time. 3 days later, they drove up a narrow gravel road to a small weathered cabin surrounded by tall trees and an almost alarmingly quiet lake. The cabin leaned slightly to one side, as if it had lost its confidence over the years. The screen door stuck. The pipes groaned. The roof let in a soft drip when it rained. Eva said it had character. Graham said it had mold. The first night was rough. Graham couldn't get the wood stove working. Leo offered unhelpful commentary from the couch, wrapped in 2 sleeping bags. I thought billionaires were supposed to know how to light things on fire. Graham gave up and used the stove to store firewood instead. They all slept in sweaters and extra socks, and when the morning sun warmed the front porch, it felt like a minor victory. They adjusted slowly. No phone signal meant no calendar reminders, no alerts. No one outside the three of them even knew where they were. Graham found himself watching ants carry crumbs off the picnic table. Eva sat on the dock with her feet in the water, sketching designs in a notebook for no reason other than habit. Leo dragged out a cardboard box of old electronics he'd packed last minute and started building something that looked like a Frankenstein radio. They cooked with mismatched pots and tried recipes from a 20-year-old camping cookbook. Most meals came out half-burned or weirdly undercooked, and yet no one complained. They ate around a lantern-lit table, passing the salt and mocking each other's pancake attempts. One night, Graham accidentally dumped an entire jar of chili powder into the stew. Eva made him finish his bowl. Leo filmed it on a camcorder he found in a closet and added commentary like it was a survival show. The days settled into something easy. Leo showed Graham how to use a soldering iron. Graham showed him how to steer a canoe, though they spun in circles the first few times and nearly crashed into a submerged log. They played card games after dinner, badly, and Graham tried to remember the last time he laughed without thinking about how it might look to someone else. Eva seemed lighter out here. Less guarded. She woke up early, made strong coffee, wandered the woods barefoot when the sun was low. She told stories at night about her aunt, about college before everything fell apart, about places she'd almost moved to but didn't. Graham listened. Sometimes she looked at him while she talked. Sometimes she didn't. Either of them pressed. Leo still called him Mr. Universe, but the edge was gone. He said it like a private joke now, something shared. One morning, while adjusting a mess of tangled wires, he said, "Hey, can you hold this?" and handed Graham a capacitor without flinching. Graham did. No comment. No fuss. Just part of the project now. On the 9th night, they built a small fire in the pit behind the cabin. They roasted marshmallows on sticks Graham had insisted were structurally sound, even though Eva's snapped mid-roast. They made messy s'mores and let the ash settle on their clothes without brushing it off. Leo sat between them, drowsy and sticky with sugar. After he went inside, Eva and Graham stayed out, staring at the low flames. "I forgot what quiet felt like," she said. He didn't answer. He was watching her. She'd been coughing more that day, something dry and rough that she kept shrugging off. Cabin air, she'd said. Would smoke. But it stuck with him. There was something behind it she wasn't naming. "You okay?" he asked. "Don't do that." "Do what?" "Ask like you want to know, then panic when you hear the answer." He didn't push. Just nodded and tossed another branch onto the fire. The embers sparked. In the silence, the wind picked up across the lake. She coughed again, turned away from him this time, and wiped at her mouth with the sleeve of her sweatshirt. "It's nothing. It's probably the dust. This place hasn't seen a vacuum since the Bush administration." Graham looked down at the cup of tea in his hands. "You sure?" "No," she said. "But I want it to be." Either of them said much after that. When they finally went inside, the cabin creaked around them, like it was settling after holding its breath. Graham lay awake on the couch that night, blanket pulled up to his chest, listening for her cough again. It came, faint but unmistakable, from the bedroom down the hall. He stared at the ceiling, heart pounding, and knew they wouldn't be able to stay out here forever. But for now, the world was quiet, and he wasn't ready to let that go. By the next morning, Graham was sure it wasn't just the dust or the smoke. Eva barely touched her coffee. She sat on the porch wrapped in a blanket, not complaining, not even pretending to enjoy the view like she usually did. Her cheeks were pale, and her energy, the quiet current she'd carried even on the tired days, seemed to have thinned. She still made a joke when Graham offered to cook breakfast, something about his over-reliance on canned beans, but her voice was flat, and when she got up to head inside, she swayed slightly and had to pause to catch her balance. Graham didn't say anything at first. Just noted it, stored it, watched her closely the rest of the day. By that evening, the cough had returned with more force, cutting through their card game and lingering even after she drank half a cup of water. She waved it off like she had the night before, said she just needed sleep. Graham nodded, but his stomach was tight and his thoughts too loud. After she went to bed, he stood by the dying fire and stared out at the lake, then at the sky, then at the closed bedroom door. Eventually, he packed a small overnight bag for her and another for Leo, just in case. In the morning, when Eva tried to downplay the cough again, he told her to get in the car. She resisted. Said she was fine. That she didn't want to spend the day sitting in a cold waiting room just to be told to rest and hydrate. Graham didn't argue. He just opened the door and waited. She looked at him, then at Leo, who was watching from the window, and relented without a word. The drive into town was silent. She leaned against the window and closed her eyes, and Graham kept checking the rearview mirror even though there was no one behind them. The clinic was small, tucked between a diner and a hardware store, with 2 nurses at the front desk and only 1 doctor on call. They were polite, efficient, and didn't bother with small talk when they saw how pale Eva looked. She was admitted right away. Leo sat in the waiting room with his arms crossed, his legs swinging. Graham tried to sit still, to read an outdated magazine or watch the news feed running silently on a mounted TV, but none of it registered. The only thing that mattered was what was happening behind the door marked Exam 3. He stood when the nurse returned. "They're doing blood work," she said. "Dr. Halley will come talk to you both shortly." Both? Graham was led to the room, where Eva was sitting upright on the exam table, looking stubborn and annoyed and more exhausted than he'd ever seen her. "They think it's pneumonia," she said before the doctor arrived. "Complicated by something else. It's not new." "What do you mean it's not new?" She looked down at her hands. "I have lupus. Diagnosed 8 years ago. It's been manageable, mostly. Meds, flares here and there. I didn't think this would be different. And you didn't think to mention that? I didn't think we'd be at a cabin in the woods with you watching me cough up a lung." The doctor entered then, cutting the conversation short. Dr. Halley was in his 50s, calm, unhurried, and blunt. He reviewed her chart and explained the situation clearly. Her white blood cell count was elevated, her oxygen levels were low, and the pneumonia was likely made worse by the autoimmune flare. They were admitting her for overnight monitoring. 4 antibiotics. Chest imaging. No dramatic alarms, but definitely not minor. Graham nodded, absorbing everything while Eva rolled her eyes and said she hated hospital beds. It wasn't until they stepped back out into the waiting area that the real weight of it landed. Leo was already on his feet. "She okay?" "She's staying here tonight," Graham said. "Just to make sure she gets what she needs." "What does that mean?" Graham didn't know how to translate the medical language into something safe. "They're running tests. They'll take good care of her." But Leo had seen something in his face, something unsteady. He didn't ask anything else. Just turned and walked toward the bathroom. Graham waited. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. He went over and knocked. "Leo?" No answer. He knocked again, more firmly. Still nothing. Finally, he tried the knob. It was locked. "Leo, I need you to open the door." A muffled voice came from the other side. "I'm fine. You're clearly not. I don't want to talk." "I didn't either, not when I was scared." But it didn't help. The silence stretched. Graham pressed his forehead to the door. "I didn't know how to be a dad. I still don't. And I was terrified of becoming one back when I first found out about Eva, except I didn't find out. That's the truth. But somewhere, I think I felt it. I just didn't go looking because I thought I didn't have anything to offer." Another pause. Then the faint click of the lock turning. Leo opened the door a few inches and looked up at him, his face blotchy but dry. "You should have looked." "I know." They stood in the hallway outside the bathroom for a long minute. Then Leo stepped past him and returned to the chairs, pulling his knees up to his chest. Graham sat down beside him but didn't say anything else. Just sat. They stayed the night in the waiting room. Graham bought Leo a vending machine sandwich and a bottle of apple juice and made him promise to sleep, but neither of them really did. In the morning, Eva was moved to a small private room. The doctor said they needed to wait for more test results, that she'd respond to treatment, but they were watching her closely. They went back to the cabin just to grab a few things: clothes, books, chargers. The drive felt longer this time. The quiet wasn't peaceful anymore. It was heavy. The calm they'd found in the days before had drained out of the place. Leo didn't joke about the stove. Graham didn't trip over the porch step. They moved through the space like guests, not like people who had started to belong. Graham grabbed what they needed and paused in the doorway before they left. The air smelled like pine and burnt coffee and the faint smoke of past fires. It had been something good, for a moment. Now it felt like a borrowed dream, one they couldn't quite afford to keep. Back in the car, Leo asked, "She's going to be okay, right?" Graham didn't answer right away. "I hope so," he said. "I really hope so." The hospital room changed over the next few days. The machines multiplied, the tubes tangled, and the silence stretched longer between interruptions. What started as observation turned into escalation. Eva's lungs weren't recovering fast enough. The inflammation from the lupus worsened the infection, and her body, already tired, was giving up ground instead of gaining it. Graham stopped asking for updates. Every day brought new numbers, new terminology, new cautious phrases from doctors who no longer looked him in the eye for more than a few seconds. He stayed anyway, barely leaving the room, sleeping in the chair by the window with a thin blanket that smelled like antiseptic. He stopped shaving after the third day. By the fifth, a nurse gently asked if he needed someone to bring him clothes. He declined. He didn't need to look presentable. He just needed to stay close. Leo came every afternoon after school. He never complained about the long bus ride or the hours spent in a too-quiet room with too many monitors. He brought books, small electronics to tinker with, a tablet to show Eva the latest robot he was coding. Sometimes she was awake enough to smile. Sometimes she wasn't. He didn't make a fuss either way. Graham marveled at his resilience. The way he kept showing up, steady and matter-of-fact, even as Eva's cough turned hollow and her sentences trailed off more often than they finished. On the seventh night, she was more alert. Graham didn't know if it was the steroids or some small gift of time, but she looked at him with full recognition and sat up a little straighter. Leo was curled up in the corner with a book, half asleep, blanket tucked under his chin. "He's okay," she whispered. Graham nodded. "He's more than okay. I thought I'd have more time," she said. "To explain things better. To prepare him. You did better than most people ever do." She looked over at Leo. "I didn't tell him everything. About us. About the choices I made. Some of it I didn't know how to say. Some of it I thought didn't matter anymore." "I can tell him," Graham said. "When he's ready." She studied him for a moment, like she was measuring the weight of those words. "Don't turn it into a story," she said. "Just tell him the truth. All of it. I promise." She closed her eyes briefly, then opened them again. "And don't go back to that version of you. The man with the answers and the calendar full of meetings. That life's not real. It used to be. It was never real. It was noise." He couldn't argue with her. He didn't want to. "You still have time," she said. "More than I do. Use it better." He reached for her hand and held it, gently, afraid that even a small squeeze might exhaust her. Her fingers were cool, her grip loose but present. They sat like that for a while, the machine behind her clicking out slow rhythms. Outside the window, the parking lot lights glowed dull yellow, casting long shadows across the floor. Later, Graham helped Leo set up the fold-out cot beside the bed. The nurse brought in a second blanket and turned the hallway light off. Leo kicked off his shoes and curled up quietly, not asking for a story tonight. Graham sat at the edge of Eva's bed and waited for her breathing to even out, but she didn't fall asleep right away. She looked at him again, clear-eyed. "Thank you," she said. For what? For showing up. He didn't have a reply for that. Not one that mattered. So he just sat there beside her as the machines clicked and the night settled in. He must have nodded off at some point, because when he woke, the light in the hallway was different, and something in the room had shifted. The air was still. Too still. He looked at the bed. Her chest wasn't rising. He stood, moved closer, placed a hand on hers. It was still warm, but there was no movement. No breath. No tension. Just stillness. The machine hadn't made a sound. She'd asked them to turn off the alarms the night before. No beeping. No panic. She didn't want to scare Leo if it happened during the night. Graham stepped back and took a breath that felt like swallowing something sharp. Then he noticed a piece of paper folded on the table beside the bed. He picked it up, unfolded it slowly. It was her handwriting, unsteady but familiar. Tell him I loved him every single day, even when I was angry. Especially then. And tell Leo the same. He folded the note and slid it into his jacket pocket. Then he turned to the cot and gently touched Leo's shoulder. Hey, he said softly. Leo stirred, blinked. Is it morning? Not quite. He looked at Graham, then at the bed. He sat up slowly, not asking the question out loud. He didn't need to. Graham sat beside him, unsure what to say. Leo spoke first. Did she go? Graham nodded. Leo pulled his knees up to his chest. I knew it last night. I felt it. They didn't cry. Not then. They just sat on the cot in silence, leaning slightly toward each other without realizing it, the distance between them no longer wide. Nurses came in quietly. One of them touched Graham's arm and asked if he needed anything. He shook his head. Leo asked if they could stay a little longer. They did. When they finally left the room, it was just after dawn. The hospital was waking up, the air filled with soft voices, the hum of machines and footsteps. Graham held Leo's hand in the elevator, and this time, Leo didn't pull away. They waited a few days before the funeral. It wasn't about logistics, there were hardly any. Eva had made it clear she didn't want a crowd, no speeches, no flowers piling up in baskets with shiny cards. She wanted simplicity. Something honest. So Graham arranged it himself, with Leo beside him every step. They picked the spot together, a quiet curve of the lake near the cabin, just past where the trees opened up and the water sat still most mornings. There was no priest. No music. Just the sound of birds and the dull thump of boat wakes rolling in from somewhere far off. They wore dark clothes because it felt right, not because anyone told them to. Graham carried the small wooden box with care and placed it on the ground beside the edge of the dock. Leo held a single rose, its stem clutched in his fingers like it meant more than anything else he could offer. I don't know what people are supposed to say, Leo said quietly. You don't have to say anything, Graham told him. Leo nodded. Then he stepped forward, leaned out, and tossed the rose. It landed softly on the surface, spun once, and drifted. They stood like that for a long time, just the two of them and the lake. Graham thought of all the times Eva had sat in this very spot, sketching, reading, watching Leo splash around in the shallows. This place belonged to her more than any office or lab or publication ever did. He didn't cry. Neither did Leo. Not there. The grief wasn't a flood, it was a slow, steady tide pulling at them in ways they hadn't figured out yet. Back in the city, everything felt louder. Graham lasted a week at Langford Dynamics before calling an emergency board meeting. Devon tried to talk him out of it, urged him to at least let the crisis cool, but Graham was done performing. He announced his resignation as CEO, handed over day-to-day operations, and stepped back into a non-executive advisory role. He said it plainly, someone else should shape what comes next. Not him. Not anymore. At first, the announcement shocked the industry. Then it sparked curiosity, and finally respect. Some thought it was an elaborate PR move. Others assumed health issues or family pressure. But Graham didn't explain. He didn't owe anyone that much anymore. The one thing he did insist on was setting the record straight. Publicly, clearly, and without spin. The company issued a statement naming Eva Serrano as co-developer of the original Langford prototype, officially crediting her work and design contributions. Graham signed it himself. The next week, they announced the launch of the Eva Serrano Memorial Scholarship for Young Women in Engineering, funded privately by Graham. It wasn't a grand gesture. It was a start. At home, life took on a different rhythm. Leo moved into Graham's apartment, and the adjustment wasn't seamless. There were arguments about bedtime, homework, how much screen time counted as too much. Graham made pancakes one morning and nearly set off the smoke alarm. Leo took over after that. They had cereal the rest of the week. The school asked Graham to fill out emergency contact forms, health history, counselor authorization. It felt like more paperwork than his last acquisition. But he did it. All of it. He started showing up at school events, sat through assemblies on recycling and robotics with his phone turned off. He joined the Parent-Teacher Association, mostly to make sure Leo didn't skip out on assignments. They fought. Often. Graham was learning how to parent a kid who didn't care about his job title, who didn't hold back when he was annoyed or overwhelmed. Sometimes Leo said things that stung, not because they were cruel, but because they were right. Graham wasn't used to being seen so plainly. But they laughed, too. They played dumb card games late at night and made frozen pizza on Fridays. Graham helped with a science fair project about solar battery storage and accidentally melted part of the circuit board with a hair dryer. Leo groaned like it was the end of the world and then laughed so hard he had to sit down. Graham stopped checking his email after 7 p.m. He started grocery shopping. He learned how to fold fitted sheets and install a shower head and make Leo's favorite grilled cheese the right way. No crusts, sharp cheddar, pan-toasted, no shortcuts. The apartment changed slowly. Framed sketches from Leo's school projects went up on the walls. The dining table was always cluttered. It felt like a place people lived. Some nights, after Leo went to bed, Graham sat out on the balcony and talked to Eva. Just quietly. Nothing dramatic. He'd tell her what Leo built that day, or how he finally passed his math quiz, or how they both forgot it was trash pickup and chased the garbage truck barefoot at 6 in the morning. Sometimes he asked if he was doing it all wrong. Sometimes he asked nothing at all. Grief didn't go away. It lingered in unexpected moments. In the sound of Eva's old playlist coming on by accident. In the question on a medical form about family history. In Leo's laugh when it matched hers exactly. But it stopped being heavy all the time. It became something else, familiar, even comforting. Proof that she'd been there. Leo didn't call him Dad yet. Graham never pushed it. But one night, after a long day of errands and a lost soccer game, Leo flopped onto the couch and said, "Can you grab me a soda, Dad?" Like it was the most natural thing in the world. Graham handed it to him without a word, then went into the kitchen and stood there alone for a minute, letting the words settle like something long overdue. They kept going. Not perfectly. Not even smoothly. But they kept going. 5 years passed, though not quietly. Time didn't glide, it banged around, demanding adjustments and compromises and 100 small decisions that Graham never imagined himself making. But it moved, and in its own uneven way, it softened things. The apartment stayed the same in layout, but it filled up fast. Shelves bowed under the weight of textbooks and old laptops taken apart, and never quite put back together. Tools scattered across the coffee table. Drawings taped to walls. Solder burns on the carpet. Nothing about the place looked like the home of a man who once sat at the helm of a global tech company. But it looked lived in, and that counted for more. Graham let his hair grow longer and didn't care when it went gray. He swapped tailored suits for sweaters that didn't quite match, and jeans that always had something smudged on them. He still consulted for the company once in a while, mostly on big-picture strategy, but he hadn't set foot in the headquarters in over a year. He was writing a book now, something messy and honest. Part personal history, part apology, part cautionary tale. No ghostwriter, no corporate polish. Just late nights and half-finished chapters and coffee that never stayed warm long enough. Leo had become a force. At 14, he had a dry wit that cut through nonsense fast and a mind that moved even faster. He was already building systems and designing circuits Graham could barely follow. He had a knack for balancing curiosity with skepticism, and when he laughed, it was still rare enough to feel like something valuable. He called Graham Dad now, not every time, but enough. Especially when it mattered. They argued like roommates and talked like partners. Graham didn't pretend to be the kind of parent who had all the answers, he just stayed close and tried to get better at listening. The inventor showcase was in 2 weeks. Leo had been prepping for months, drawing blueprints in his notebooks and building rough prototypes that buzzed or lit up or did nothing at all until the 3rd or 4th try. The apartment looked like a tiny, chaotic lab. Graham had been roped into helping with the displayed board, a task he approached with cautious optimism and a glue gun. He burned his finger 20 minutes in and swore under his breath. "You're not allowed to bleed on the title," Leo said without looking up. "I'm not bleeding. You're dramatic. I'm in pain." Leo handed him a band-aid and went back to his wiring. Graham applied it without comment and returned to gluing the neon orange border around the title card, adaptive solar storage for mobile units. He didn't know if it would win anything, but it was smart, and it was Leo's. That was enough. As the anniversary of Eva's death approached, the house grew quieter. They didn't talk about it until the day came. Leo woke up early, already dressed, a folded paper in his hand and a small bouquet of wildflowers tucked into his backpack. Graham packed a thermos of coffee and 2 ham sandwiches and didn't ask questions. The lake hadn't changed. The water still moved slow, framed by trees that had thickened but stayed familiar. The dock creaked under their weight as they stepped onto it, and Graham felt the ache of memory in his chest. Not painful, just there. Leo sat down cross-legged and pulled out the folded paper. It was the drawing he'd made when he was 9, the one Eva used to keep in a kitchen drawer. The original sketch, the prototype, crude and smudged, but with 3 stick figures added near the bottom. One had curly hair and long arms. One wore a tiny square labeled suit. And one had mismatched eyes, each a different color, just like his. He held it up without speaking. Graham took it carefully and studied it again. It hadn't changed. He had. Leo stood, walked to the edge of the dock, and tossed the flowers into the water. They spread out slowly, some caught in the breeze, others drifting toward the far bank. Graham didn't try to say anything profound. They stood together, watching until the last petal disappeared. On the way back, Leo didn't talk much. He dozed in the car, head leaning against the window, his backpack open beside him with wires poking out of a Ziploc bag. Graham kept one hand on the wheel and the other resting near the gear shift, catching the rise and fall of the boy's breathing, just steady enough to know everything was okay for now. The school auditorium was small, the kind with folding chairs that wobbled and a makeshift stage lit by overhead fluorescents. There were maybe 100 people in the audience, students, teachers, a few parents already half distracted by their phones. Graham stood backstage, holding a single page of notes. He wasn't there as the keynote speaker, not officially. Just a parent asked to talk about innovation. The teacher who introduced him didn't mention his company. Just called him Leo Serrano's father. That was enough. He stepped up and looked at the crowd. His voice, when it came, was quiet and steady. "When I was younger, I thought being first mattered more than being honest. I thought success was about who got the credit, who won, who stood on the biggest stage. I was wrong. I've had time to learn that being right isn't nearly as important as doing right. And that sometimes, the most important thing you can build is trust. Especially when it's almost too late." No thunderous applause followed. Just a small wave of clapping, polite but warm. In the front row, Leo sat with his arms folded, the faintest smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. Graham didn't need more than that. Afterward, Leo's project drew a crowd of students asking questions, tapping at the panel controls and asking if he'd patented it. He handled them all calmly, explaining features, tweaking settings, correcting wrong assumptions with the same confidence he'd had as a boy on a TED stage, photo in hand, demanding the truth. Graham